Hi everyone, and welcome to our online session. First of all, I wish you happy International Women's Day. We are happy on this occasion to host Melanie Whittaker from Designation One to talk about why boardrooms need more women. And this is not a question, this is an affirmation. So let me introduce Melanie Whittaker. Melanie is the co-founder of Designation One. She is Designation One. Maybe Melanie, you can describe a little more what this is, what you are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much, Brunel. So Designation One is a platform that will match open board positions, particularly from non-profit boards, to interested individuals that find it difficult to find pathways and access to board service through the traditional ways of how boards are being recruited. And I know we're going to speak about this a little bit later. And we will also provide work as the connector between private sector companies and nonprofits on the nexus of talent retention and helping them understand how allowing their diverse talent to serve on nonprofit boards is actually beneficial for their talent retention, talent acquisition, and it fits perfectly well into their ESG strategies.
Yeah, no, so for sure, I will share the link of your website so that people can have a look on what you're specifically doing. You're quite active in America, in the US, in the UK. You are a senior leader with extensive international experience in the private and public sector, and you've also a specialization in non-governmental organization. So now, Melanie, thanks a lot for this online session for Impulse for Women. We are really pleased to have you today. And maybe we can start with some definition about what is boardroom, what is an inclusive boards, maybe.
Yes, thank you very much. You see, you mentioned correctly, I am very active professionally in the transatlantic space. And by that, I mean particularly the United States and Europe, all of Europe, including say, non-EU states in Europe. And there seems to sometimes be a confusion about when we talk about boards and what defines a board and what kind of different boards are there. So in effect, and it really comes with the semantics and the understanding and the definitions between the US, but also in Europe. And so generally, when we talk about a board, we think about the governing board, which is the supervisory function of any organization requiring a board. And that means, I mean, it's publicly traded companies, it's non-profit companies, it's charitable organizations. Then there's something that we call the executive board, and that is actually operational. So it's no longer the governing board, the supervisor that has the supervisory and fiduciary responsibilities. And the executive board usually reports to the governing board with the fiduciary responsibility. And then there's the third category, which we refer to as advisory boards. They really, as stated, they advise. So they have no governing function, no fiduciary responsibility, and you will be brought on for your expertise, usually to advise either the executive committee or executive board or even the governing board. So it's purely in your role as experts that you would be brought in. I think that is sometimes there is a misunderstanding of what actually is a board and what does the board do. So by definition, would you like me to continue? Because I can talk about this for hours.
Yeah, no, this is quite interesting because, Impulse for Women as a non-profit organization helps to connect female tech founders and social impact project funders with the right investors. Our membership is free, and we also offer some advice, some training, this kind of webinar. And one of the preoccupation of our funders is basically, when I find the right investor, what will happen in terms of advisory boards. Because some investors are negotiating with the startup founders the possibility to be on the boards. So maybe we can focus on that point. They want, as investors, to be part of the advisory board.
Yes, I'd like to go back. So the governing board that has supervisory, the fiduciary responsibility. I think one important thing where we have to think about is as an supervisory board and also as an advisory board, you are hands off, right? You're not operational. And so we would like to talk about it. You put your head in and you keep your hands out. So you're really there to give advice, to be the sounding board, particularly in the governing board. As a governing board member, you are the sounding board for the CEO or the president of the organization, whether it's a for-profit organization or a non-profit organization. And again, the advisory board is your expertise, and it's you give the guidance and also function to a certain degree as a sounding board to the members or to the people in charge of running the organization. And I can see that sometimes that may lead to friction with investors that probably would like to be angel investors, and in a way that's perfect. But you only give the advice. You give, you make suggestions, and the people still have to come up also with their own strategy. This is slightly different in non-profit boards and also for-profit companies. If you really want to think about it, the governing board with the fiduciary responsibility set the vision and the strategy of an organization. So they are the ones, again, it's hands out, is bring your brains in and you bring your foresight in. You look at what are the trends, where does this organization need to go, what needs to be happening. And that really should be, in essence, the task of a governing board. So it's not only about compliance, and it's not only, non-profits, oh yeah, write you a check when I'm on your board. It's bringing your skill sets, your expertise, and your ability to lead strategically as a diverse board to make those organizations successful.
So you are skilled in non-profit governance and management as board member, isn't it, Melanie?
Yes, I also serve on the board of directors of a non-profit organization, a charitable organization in the UK. And as such, we do have that board is a fully governing board, so we do have fiduciary responsibility, which means in that sense, a board with fiduciary responsibility, we hire, or that board will sign off on the finances, on the audit. So the board is the one that is the signatories for anything that goes to the outside, anything that goes to the government agencies in terms of reporting. And the board also hires the CEO. And I serve on a charitable organization in the arts world, which also means we do also hire as the board not only the managing director, but also the artistic director.
Okay.
So those are the two main tasks of the boards: the fiduciary responsibility, signing off on finances, on the audits, and hiring the CEO.
Okay, so no, thanks for that specification. The different kinds of boards. So we basically we have the governmental board, the executive board, and the advisory boards. They can be part of corporation, non-profit organization, and company for sure for some startups which are scaling. I wish we can maybe go to our topic on International Women's Day right now. Um, well, just a common thought. Generally, results in when women are in the leadership often comes up. Um, One says that generally results is increasing value for shareholders. One why there are women on boardrooms. What can be said today in 2023 regarding that topic, Melanie?
Thank you. So actually, we did see an enormous increase in the appointment of female board members, both on executive boards and governing boards last year. Predominantly white women in the US, but also in Europe, where there is data available. So that is, and I think what I just want to say, last year in 2022, according to, is a report, it's called the Board Monitor by an executive search firm called Heidrick & Struggles. And their research, they found that 50% of the UK FTSE 500 boards, so again, big public traded companies, actually the new board members were female. Almost 80% of them were white women, and the other 20% were underrepresented women. When it comes to greater return on for their shareholders, when we look at it purely from a for-profit sector, it is true. First of all, more diverse teams make better decision making. And more diverse, I'm not only talking about gender diversity or any other what we refer to as surface level diversity, so based on the color of your skin, but particularly cognitive diversity. And women do think differently than men. Women are much more cautious. Women think 2 or 3 times before signing off on something. So, and they do often think much more long-term, far-reaching, and that is a trend that we also see. It's away from the short-term investment, the short-term returns to the longer impact of an organization or for-profit company. So yes, there's a more thoughtful shareholder return in the long run when you have more women on boards. It's striking to me that when I look at for-profit boards, particularly in the areas of fast-moving consumer goods, how little or how few women we see on those boards. And we do know that over 80% of household purchases actually decided
80%.
Over 80% of household purchases or anything that's bought at home, any holiday that's booked, is usually decided by a woman. So, and yet we do not see them reflected in those companies. So I find that striking. In terms of the other part of the question was on the shareholder return, and what was the other part?
Yeah, no, I was wondering for shareholders, but maybe do you have some key insight regarding greater financial returns for them?
There are greater financial returns because women are more cautious about decision making. They're much more balanced. They think a woman will think 2 or 3 times before she signs off on something, on a major investment, and
they are more conservative.
That really, so in the P&L, in the profit and loss, it will showcase in that sense that there will be a greater return on the shareholder. Depending on the company and depending on the sector, it will be. What we also want to think about is to say, where are societies going? So societies are going undergoing a tremendous demographic change. So all the younger generations coming from Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, usually the people in charge at the moment are baby boomers / Gen X. They're really at the highest echelons, and everything that's coming up wants to see itself reflected. They want to see themselves reflected in the leadership levels, and they will look for it, and they will make these conscious decisions on where will I buy and where will I put my money and who will get my money. Do I see my values and do I see myself reflected in these companies? So it will be of greater importance actually to have more diverse boards and not only a gender parity. So that is definitely something that we're seeing.
Yeah, more regarding to policy or government apply. You mentioned previously that women, when there are decisions to be taken, women thinks twice the decision. So basically, can we conclude that boardrooms with women are regarding lower risk taking when they have women in boardroom?
I don't know whether we can generally, whether it's like a generalization we can say. Women tend to be more cautious. I don't like the term like, oh, they're risk averse or they avoid risk. It's a more conservative, cautious way of thinking and looking at things, more thoroughly thinking about it and looking at it from different angles. So I personally don't like the term, oh, women are, risk avoiders or
Yeah.
low risk. It's a more cautious, thorough approach in decision making.
Well, thanks for this clarification. It's important to have this information in details. Just feel free to put your questions in the chat or to unmute yourself. Alejandra, Beatrice, should you want to say something, for sure. And if anybody wants to say something, maybe we can go on boardroom including women. Basically, Melanie, what percentage of boardroom are women?
Yes, thank you. So that's an interesting point, and in many countries we don't have necessarily the data available. So where we have
Okay.
the data is, for example, we very much have the data on the big publicly traded companies. Whether it's S&P 500, whether it's FTS 500, whether it's companies like Heidrick and Struggles, whether it's Deloitte, all these big, large advisory companies will do reports or board monitors, but they're always focused on the big publicly traded companies. And then there's an organization in the US called Board Source, and they have a report which they refer to as Leading with Intent, and they particularly researched the US nonprofit sector. It's a huge nonprofit sector. The US nonprofit sector is about 1.8 million organizations registered with the IRS, and they employ almost about 10% of the US workforce. So it's a very large industry. And they have a report called Leading with Intent. Now, from there, we do know that when it comes to non-profit boards, the CEO, board chairs, board members, 50%, sometimes even over 50% are women. So there's gender parity. That dwindles down to about 32% when we look at for-profit companies. So there is a discrepancy. And we do know also, like from the UK, I think we are hovering. Just see, what did I see? Of the FTSEs, there's in Europe overall. Actually, we probably have female board representation at around 43%.
43.
43, yes. So, and it used to be a bit higher, so about 45. So, but that's overall. That's overall Europe, and I think the UK actually is quite progressive in that sense. Germany, we're hovering around 30%, I think, little over 30%. In the US, we have no, in the US, I just said it was 32%. So we are far away from gender parity when it comes to for-profit boards. Non-profit seems to be. I mean, what you also have to think about is non-profit boards often are not remunerated, so they're unpaid board positions. They're a great way to hone your skills, and they're a great way to engage yourself and engage yourself not only on something that's connected to your work, but it's also, it gives you great satisfaction because you may get involved into on a cause that's close to your heart. Now, we don't have any of those numbers when it comes to advisory boards. So
we don't have.
We don't. I'm not aware of any. No, 43%, not 83%.
So
somebody said something. It's not. No, it's not 83%. Of the 43% of women that were appointed to boards in the UK last year, 80% were white women. So when we look beyond gender, the meta level of gender, and break down then into further diversity markers, so in terms of ethnicity or race, cognitive diversity, disability, then it dwindles down even further.
So this key insight are more for the US, the one you mentioned, isn't it? The one 43%, because
that was the UK, the United Kingdom, and in Europe overall. So the data that is available in all of Europe, where they do the survey, that was there. The number of female board members is about 43. That's the average.
So maybe this is closely related to the policies applied by government there in the US.
It will be partly, yes, because when you look at it, because it was only last year that the EU Commission, and it was Ursula von der Leyen, basically said, yes, we do need to have 40% women in the boardroom. Why only 40%? I don't know, because 50% of the workforce are women. So why again, why are we doing only 40%? Who are we appeasing here to say like, oh, we'll be happy with 40%? In individual countries, there had been already legislation, particularly in Scandinavian countries, where they had already stated you need to have 50% in the boardroom, 50% need to be female. Germany had for a long time, they had this, that companies would self-commit to having more women in the boardrooms or more women in leadership positions. But now there's also the law. Now the law is EU-wide, so it has to be implemented in every member state. And I think what we can see once a policy has been made law or a regulation, from there then it will still take several years for it to come into effect. And what I sometimes compare this to is when we look into the political arena. So we have now 2023, 1980, the Green Party in Germany entered national parliament. So 43 years.
Just to mention, Melanie, you are based.
I'm based in Berlin.
Germany.
Yes, I'm based in Berlin, and here International Women's Day is a public holiday. But I want to give you that as a very good example of how long things take.
Yeah.
What are the trickle effects?
That's what I was
the Green
thinking.
Party has in their statutes that the leadership has to be 50-50. So female, women, men, and it trickles down like that. So every other seat in campaigns is a woman. So it's always a man, a woman, a man, a woman, a man, a woman, and they're the only party that has that, huh? So but then from there's a trickle effect into other parties. So all of a sudden, the Social Democrats became more, there were more women, even the CDU had more women, not as many. and some other parties, but there is a trickle effect into other areas. And I think what we will see is, with this being made a regulatory affair, so basically law in the EU, to have more women on corporate boards, on private company boards, we will see this trickle down into other things, into other structures, into other organizations. And what we also know, because there was a study done, it was, unfortunately, I want to say at this point, focusing on Fortune 500 companies in the US. There was a study done by a set of researchers from Columbia University, Cornell University, that researched the effect of having more women on boards and how it affected other diversity dimensions. And what they found out was, when we have more women on boards, it's overall better for diversity, trickling down throughout an organization. So what I mean is not just that there will be generally more women, but there will also be other diverse people being hired, being brought up, being promoted, being put into leadership positions. So we're talking about racial and ethnic diversity, cognitive diversity, visibility. So these type of diversity markers, they have that effect. We don't see that same effect when we add diverse men to a board.
Diverse men to a board.
Yes. So let's say a non-white man. If we add non-white men to a board, it does not have the same effect. It will not increase gender diversity within an organization.
You know, Melanie, I will send some by email some feedback. Maybe we can share this data, this key insight,
Yes.
and the sources, so that people can get rid of
Yes.
all this common thought.
So there's some stuff in the
quite
okay.
interesting.
There was something in the chat.
Yeah, or in the chat, feel free to share your data. What I was thinking regarding the challenges regarding inclusion and diversity, and what you said regarding European Union, is that there is a big differences between northern countries and southern countries. This is not just an uniform policies and government apply there. So this is not only about culture. This is maybe also regarding education. Education, is that an option for
I don't think it has to do with education per se. We do know that women, particularly also younger women, their education is excellent, and they often achieve much better results than men or young men at university. They don't, they're not afraid of studying subjects that we would probably consider rather male subjects before. So I don't think it's a matter of education. I think it's more opportunities and access to opportunities, and opening the doors. What we know from boards, of how boards are being recruited for and who sits on the board, is there's rarely that a company will use a recruiter. In the non-profit sector, almost none will use an official, like a headhunting agency to find board members, appoint board members. On boards, what usually happens is that there is a nomination committee, and the nomination committee then starts looking for new board members. And often what they do is then they fish within their own tank. So they know somebody knows somebody. That, of course, will not add diversity per se to a board. So it's access to opportunities, and in that way there needs to be more transparency of how boards are recruiting their board members. So are they actually, we can encourage them to use recruitment agencies. They can actually do a proper application process for it. They can have a board package for it, you know, what is included, who needs to be, what do we need, the skill sets that are actually needed. So what boards can do to do that, but there's also really a mind shift still, you know, so is do something that we refer to as a board audit. So what you want to find out is like, who is actually on your board? What skill sets do they bring with you? What is their age? Where do they come from? What, you know, are there women, men, other diversity markers? And then go from there and see like, okay, actually we already have 5 people with financial expertise, but who else is not there yet? So who do we need? And that it's much more targeted in who you want to have on your board. So it's really access to opportunities. And I think that's something that we want to try, at least for the nonprofit sector, change with designation 1. Provide a place where people, you know, where organizations can actually advertise their open board positions. And just to give you an example, we do know that in the United Kingdom, pretty much every day, there's about 25,000 non-profit board seats vacant.
25,000.
25,000. Oh, yes. So any charitable organization that needs to have a board, yes. So, and you know, it's unpaid. You bring your volunteer time to it, but it's a wonderful opportunity. It's great fun.
Yeah, this was maybe the basis of when you founded Designation 1. I was thinking I could share in the chat the link of the website of Designation 1. Well, we have I will share the link. We have a question from Beatrice. She said, as a woman, what's your advice and how can we break into a board positions? It looks to Beatrice as it could be difficult at the moment unless a company, either non-profit or not, is oriented to be more gender diversity.
Thank you, Beatrice.
What's your advice?
Yes, there is a bit of a shift now, and you know, last year, as I said, actually in the US it was last year, 43% of board positions that were appointed, and we're only talking for-profit boards, publicly traded boards, were actually given to first-time directors. So people that never served on a board before, but probably had leadership experience. And I think it really depends on what type of board you're looking for. If you've never served on a board before, or have never really been in a, let's say, larger organization, a private company with great experience, you could think about going for a non-profit board. And actually on our website, Designation 1, what we've done is we've done, we've created 2 little quiz. You know, they're very short, fun quiz, and one is for an individual to find out, you know, what type of board would be suitable for me, and then for an organization is like, do I actually know who is on my board? And that's one way to go. So depending on where you are, in what part of the world, there are some recruitment agencies that focus on board positions and non-profit boards. So you can go there. In the UK, places such as The Guardian will have advertisements for particularly non-profit board appointments. So organizations use that as well. And other than that, really activate your own networks. So if you know of someone who's serving on a board or has served on a board, talk to them. If you hear something, when it comes to for-profit boards, it's also, if you know, but it really is at the moment, it is until we have a proper mind shift, and we are still away from that. That's why we founded Designation 1, because we want to get into that mind shift. But until then, use any opportunity available to you to talk to somebody that you know that serves on a board, whether it's a non-profit board, a for-profit board, and ask them if they would be willing to mentor you, if they would be willing to coach you a little bit, if they hear anything, that you are ready. You're ready to start serving on a board. You're ready to bring your skills, your expertise to a boardroom. And by the way, there are lots of non-profit boards actually that also pay, or at least pay for your expenses. So there is, and it is there. They're out there, but it is at the moment, I'm afraid, still very much you proactively have to go out there and seek it and start talking to people and look for those opportunities. And then think about the 3 main skills that you would add to a board. So what is it that you're really good at? What is your subject matter expertise? And it could be from communications to legal, to finances, to strategy, to human resources. In non-profit boards, often it's about fundraising. Do you have any fundraising experience? The latest ones that are very much sought after is ESG or sustainability, DEI, and cybersecurity. So those are, particularly in the for-profit world, is private companies, private boards. Those are the key skills at the moment that I think are highly sought after.
Thank you, Melanie. That's a great advice. It's always about networking as well. Talk to someone and thinking about these 3 things, right? That you can add to a board.
Yes. Think about 2 to 3 expertises, and it could be even a geographical expertise.
I see.
Of course, China, in the private sector, China is always hot. So
it's not my expertise, I'm afraid. Yeah.
But there are certain things that are very hip. I don't want to say hip, but there's really sought after. So cyber security, Web3, crypto.
That's right.
But also ESG, particularly sustainability. When it comes to ESG, of course, the sustainability is mainly in the E, in the environment, and the other 2 are social and governance.
Yeah.
So in social, we're talking about labor relations. We talk about workforce DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. When we talk governance, it's not only compliance. Compliance is very, very, very important. But on the governance side in ESG, there is board diversity. How diverse is your board? And that gets overlooked often. And those 3 things, of course, intersect. We do know that if we have more compliance, and also I do think that women are far more compliant than men in the way they make business decisions. Not really cutting corners on things. So it's very important, and then it will affect all the other things. So we have a tendency to start, when we look at ESG, we have a tendency to start with the E, with the environment, which is important because we need, our planet is beautiful and we want it to continue to be beautiful, and we want to continue to have a world we can live in. But I like to look at it from the G, from the governance, from the sort of say the back end. And they're like, okay, if we do have a more diverse board, then there is probably greater compliance. It will trickle down into labor relations. It will trickle down into the DI of the workforce. And once we have all that more inclusive, it will also be better for the planet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Melody. So evidence has shown again and again that adding more women to governance levels and board prove beneficial to the overall performance. So we can get in mind that there is a great gender parity on the US non-profit boards. There is the same cannot be said on private company.
No.
But we are still on what can be done to make them more, to make boards more inclusive.
I do think I do think having legislation in place is a must-have. Because I do think, and we saw that in the case of California, when California a couple of years ago said like, oh, on every publicly traded board, there needs to be one woman, at least one woman and one person of color. And even though the California Supreme Court said, oh, it's unconstitutional, we already saw the effect. So it will have an effect. It maybe take a little slower, but I do think legislation is a necessary must-have for the time being, because there was also the report, I think it was yesterday, the day before, from the UN Secretary General, that according to the UN's estimate, the world globally, we are about 300 years away from gender parity, probably in all aspects of life, but that's worrisome. You know, when we think about that, really suffragette movement started in the 1840s, 1850s in the US and some other countries. So, you know, we've been at it already for over 150 years. And to be another 300 years away is worrisome. So legislation. I do think legislation is a must-have at this point to have that, because I think the self-committing of companies, and what we shouldn't forget is, you know, someone decides. There's always someone that decides what inclusion or diversity means, and we should also think about that. When this legislation comes in place, that somebody may have to give up something or make room for something. So give up something or make room for something. So it's rare that somebody wants to give something up. Also, when we look at the current average age of people serving on boards, both in the US and in Europe, the average age is something about 57, 58. So when you sit on a governing board, there's no age limit. It's not like you need to retire by the 65. You can sit on the board when you're 75, when you're 80. And we also enter an area of longevity. So people live longer and they are healthier and they want to stay engaged much longer, which is a good thing. But it also means it's less likely for somebody to give something up. So what other ways do we have? And when I said make room is sometimes when an organization looks at their statutes, their board bylaws, there is room to play. And you can add board members. You know, there's a set numbers, or there's a range of number of board members you can have, or you can change your bylaws. And you can, you know, you can vote on your bylaws and you can say, oh, you know, we add a couple of board seats. And then that's the first step of, you know, nobody has to give up anything, but you can invite other people in. So, but that's just the first step. And after that, what we really are talking about becoming inclusive boards and having inclusive board practices that everybody has equity and an equal voice at the table. So, but that's a different topic for a different webinar of how to get yourself heard at the table. So.
Okay. Well, I don't know if there is another question from the attendees. Feel free to unmute and ask directly to Melanie. If there is anyone else want to speak. Okay. Well, anyway, now it's just quite interesting, Melanie, to have you today on International Women's Day. Thanks a lot for your thoughts and the expertise you provide to our community. Thanks a lot. We were really pleased to have you for this session. Yeah, the session has been registered for sure, recorded, and we will publish it soon throughout our YouTube channel. Melanie, thanks a lot for your participation.
Okay.
Thanks
you very much.
everyone. Thanks everyone
Thank
for
you so much to you.
your participation.
Thank
And
you. Bye
I
bye.
wish you, on behalf of Impulse for Women team, happy International Women's Day.
You too. Bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.